Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave,
on behalf of every father and every mother,
wings for freedom. On behalf of our warriors,
and paves the way for a new history.
Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have a great show for you today. It's going to be pretty standard fare. First, if you could, please do hit the like button on the stream and subscribe to Tochnyi for all of our great updates. You can also check us out on Twitter and Blue Sky. And of course, we have our website, tochnyi.info, where our contributors publish articles and post maps and other things like that that are very useful. One of those articles made quite a splash in the old news. Yeah, you can check out all of our great content over there. If you guys have any questions in the chat, feel free to ask any questions you guys have. We'll do our best to address them during the Q&A segment. That includes anything that you guys post in the comments of the old videos and stuff like that. So yeah, you can feel free in the chat or in the comments to post any questions you have. So yeah, as I mentioned, it'll be a pretty standard show this week. First, I will present the news as I always do. Then our colleague, Mr. Germanade, will present his report. And then Stanimir will present his report, and then we'll go to some stuff I wanted to talk about, followed by Q&A. So without any delay, then I will go ahead and present the news. These are the main headlines as of August 31st, 2025. First up, we have operations. Ukrainian forces launched aerial operations during the night of August 30th, striking 2 oil processing facilities in Russia's Krasnodar Krai and Samara Oblast, according to the Ukrainian General Staff. The attacks targeted the Krasnodar refinery and the Krasnodar Krai and the Syzran refinery in Samara Oblast. Officials in Kyiv described the strikes as part of efforts to reduce Russia's ability to maintain its military campaign and to disrupt the fuel supply chain. The Krasnodar refinery produces around 3 million tons of light petroleum products each year, including gasoline, diesel, and aviation fuel. It was reported to be contributing to supplies for the Russian armed forces. Local emergency services confirmed that debris from downed drones damaged one of the plant's installations, sparking a blaze that spread across roughly 300 square meters before being contained. The Syzran oil refinery, located in Samara Oblast, was struck for a second time. This facility handles an annual volume of around 8.5 million tons, producing gasoline, diesel, aviation kerosene, fuel oil, and bitumen. The Ukrainian General Staff emphasized that both refineries are critical in sustaining Russia's fuel output and logistics capacity. Russian oil export figures from the Ust-Luga terminal on the Baltic Sea are being cut in half for September following Ukrainian drone strikes. The facility, which normally handles around 700,000 barrels per day, is expected to operate at about 350,000 barrels per day after damage from recent attacks. The slowdown is the result of earlier strikes on critical pipeline infrastructure, which has forced emergency adjustments to crude oil flows. The Unecha pumping station in Bryansk is a key hub in Russia's pipeline network. It was also among the targets struck this month. This pumping station not only channels crude to Ust-Luga, but also connects to the Druzhba pipeline, which provides oil to Belarus, Slovakia, and Hungary. The disruption is known to have reduced flows through the Druzhba, though Slovakia announced on the 28th of August that deliveries had partially resumed in a test mode. Industry sources indicated that repair work has started, although it remains unclear how long it will take before Ust-Luga returns to full capacity. In the meantime, Moscow is diverting shipments to the Primorsk and Novorossiysk ports to reduce losses in export volumes. On August 28th, Ukrainian forces carried out a coordinated operation in the Sea of Azov that damaged a Russian warship equipped to launch Caliber cruise missiles, according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry's main intelligence directorate. The target was the Project 21631 Buyan M small missile ship positioned near the coast of occupied Crimea. The action involved Hor's Department of Active Operations working alongside the Primary or Phantom Special Forces unit. Soldiers from the Special Forces first struck the vessel's radar system with a drone, while HOR units launched a direct attack on the ship itself. The strikes hit the vessel while it was operating in the Temryuk Bay, an area from which Caliber missiles can be launched. Following the damage, the ship was forced to pull back from its patrol zone, limiting its ability to continue its mission. Ukrainian officials stated that the operation successfully degraded the vessel's combat readiness. The partisan group Atesh reported that its members sabotaged railway infrastructure in Kostroma by destroying a relay cabinet on a branch line used to support Russian military production. The operation targeted an area located deep inside Russian territory, far from border regions, which the group highlighted as evidence that such strikes can reach areas previously thought to be secure. The damaged railway line is part of a network that transports fuel, equipment, and components to defense-related factories in central Russia. By disabling the relay cabinet, the partisans disrupted train operations, causing traffic delays and hindering deliveries critical to sustaining the army's logistics chain. In their statement, Atesh also referenced an earlier action in Krasnodar Krai, where one of its agents carried out an operation that resulted in the destruction of a military vehicle and damaged two others. Up next, we have economy and aid. The U.S. State Department has authorized the sale of up to 3,350 extended-range attack munition, or ERAM missiles, to Ukraine, along with the associated support equipment. The package is valued at $825 million, according to the Pentagon's Defense Security Cooperation Agency, and the purchase will be financed jointly by Denmark, the Netherlands, Norway, and U.S. foreign military assistance programs. ERAM missiles have a strike range between 240 and 450 kilometers, and according to the Wall Street Journal, a comment from an inside source reported that Ukraine would need U.S. approval for their use. CNN added that deliveries could begin in 2025, although it remains uncertain whether Washington will impose limits on how Kyiv can use them. This marks the first major weapons deal of its kind for Ukraine cleared by the Trump administration, as previous sales approved by the White House were limited to equipment and arms already provided to Kyiv either by the United States or other allied partners. On August 29, the U.S. State Department approved military sales to Ukraine totaling $329 million for the upkeep of Patriot air defense systems and continued access to the Starlink satellite communication system. Roughly $179 million of the package is allocated to sustaining Patriots, covering spare parts, maintenance support, software updates, contractor training, and other related services. Another $150 million is designated for extending satellite communication services for Ukraine's Starlink terminals, with support to be provided by both the U.S. government and contractors for engineering and logistics needs. The decision follows a June agreement between the United States and NATO enabling member states to fund American-made weapons for Ukraine under the Prioritized Ukraine Requirements list. Since early August, allies including Canada, Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands, Norway, and Sweden have committed resources to the initiative. Congressional approval is still required before the transfers can be finalized, and no timeline has yet been given for delivery. Belgium will provide €100 million in 2025 to help purchase U.S.-made weapons for Ukraine, according to the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Denis Shmyhal. He noted that the funds are part of NATO's new Prioritized Ukraine Requirements List initiative, which was set up to streamline and accelerate the supply of American weapon systems to Kyiv. Shmyhal stated that the contribution adds to the €1 billion in military aid Belgium has already delivered in the past. He also expressed gratitude to Belgian officials and the Belgian public for their continued backing of Ukraine's defense efforts. Poland's Ministry of Internal Affairs confirmed on August 29 that it is preparing new legislation to regulate the legal status of Ukrainian citizens after the president vetoed an amendment that would have prolonged temporary protection. The deputy prime minister met with the Ukrainian ambassador, where he outlined the legislative timeline and assured that the work on a new bill is underway. The ambassador later stated that Polish officials had promised Ukrainian citizens would continue to have the right to reside, work, study, and access social assistance and healthcare beyond October 1, 2025, although he acknowledged that some practical matters remain unresolved. He stressed that Ukrainians legally living in Poland would remain under Polish and EU legal frameworks, and even without new legislation, transitional measures would be introduced to prevent a legal vacuum. The vetoed amendment would have extended temporary protection until March 4, 2026. Prime Minister Donald Tusk warned that blocking it could negatively affect Polish businesses. Data showed Ukrainians contributed around 18.7 billion zloty in taxes and insurance payments in 2024 and boosted Poland's GDP by nearly 2%, about 99 billion zloty. Still, media polling indicated that most Poles supported the president's decision. As of February, nearly 1 million Ukrainians, primarily women and children, were residing in Poland, while 1.5 million hold valid residence permits. Ukrainians make up 78% of all foreigners residing in Poland, making them by far the largest foreign community. The Hungarian foreign minister announced on August 28 that Hungary has banned a Ukrainian military commander from entering both the company and the wider Schengen zone following strikes on the Druzhba oil pipeline. He said the decision was taken in response to what Budapest views as direct threats to Hungary's energy security. In a video statement, the Hungarian foreign minister described the Druzhba pipeline as essential for Hungary's oil supply, claiming that Ukraine was fully aware of its importance. He argued that the recent strikes, which targeted pumping stations on August 19th and 21st, harmed Hungary and Slovakia more than Russia, and noted that repair delays forced his country to nearly draw on strategic reserves. The minister emphasized that Hungary considers every attack on the pipeline as an attack on Hungary's national sovereignty. He announced that the commander of the Ukrainian unit involved in the most recent operation would be barred from entering Hungary or the Schengen zone for years to come. I'm not sure Hungary has the power to do that. We'll have to ask some of the Europeans. While the Hungarian foreign minister did not name the specific officer, the likely target is Robert Magyar Brovdi, the head of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces and an ethnic Hungarian, who publicly acknowledged responsibility for the latest strike while invoking a 1956 anti-Soviet slogan. After more than 3 years in Russian captivity, the former mayor of Kherson, Volodymyr Mykolayenko, has returned to Ukraine as part of the latest prisoner exchange. Mykolayenko, who served as mayor from 2014 to 2020, was known for his strong opposition to pro-Russian activists and was abducted by Russian forces on April 18, 2022, shortly after Kherson was occupied. Human rights advocates reported that he was first taken to Crimea and later transferred to a prison in Russia's Vladimir region, where he was held without formal charges. According to his niece, Mykolayenko was initially considered for a swap in 2022, but instead asked that a severely ill soldier sharing his cell be exchanged instead. Since then, Russia refused to place him on exchange lists. He was initially freed on Ukraine's Independence Day, August 24th, in an exchange that saw each side return 146 soldiers, along with 8 civilians from Russia's Kursk region. After his release, Mykolayenko described the day as his, quote, second birthday and expressed gratitude that it coincided with Independence Day. Among the other Ukrainians freed was UNIAN journalist Dmytro Hiliuk, who had been abducted in the Kyiv region in March of 2022. President Zelensky confirmed Hiliuk's release, noting that most of those returning home had been in captivity since 2022. He thanked the government team working on the swaps, international partners, the UAE for its mediation, and Ukrainian forces for replenishing the, quote, exchange fund. Zelensky emphasized that exchanges remain ongoing and are a priority until every Ukrainian held in Russia is returned. Russia is set to withdraw from the European Convention on the Prevention of Torture following a decree signed by the Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin on Saturday, which proposes that President Vladimir Putin should submit the measure to the State Duma. The decree was made public on Monday evening. The convention, adopted in 1987, allows international inspections of detention facilities in member states. Russia ratified it in 1998, 2 years after joining the Council of Europe. However, Moscow left the Council in March of 2022 after its suspension over the invasion of Ukraine and later that year pulled out of the European Convention on Human Rights, ending recognition of rulings from the European Court on Human Rights. Russia remains party to the UN Convention Against Torture, which it ratified in 1985. An NGO called A Crew Against Torture warned that leaving the European framework would worsen conditions in Russian prisons. Over Russia's 27 years under the treaty, the European Committee for the Prevention of Torture carried out 30 visits and drafted 27 reports, but Moscow only agreed to release 4. According to the group, the convention helped reduce overcrowding, improve conditions in penal colonies, and strengthen protections for inmates. The organization said that the move dismantles the last remaining international oversight of human rights inside Russia, removing all formal protections for prisoners and paving the way for further deterioration. No timetable has yet been set for formal exit from the treaty. And last item this week, Russian President Vladimir Putin will travel to China this weekend for an extended visit the Kremlin described as unprecedented, with Ukraine expected to be at the center of discussions. During nearly a week's stay in Beijing, he will attend the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, hold talks with Xi Jinping, and appear at China's Victory Day military parade alongside the leaders of North Korea, Iran, and Cuba. Analysts say that the goal is for Putin and Xi to coordinate their positions on the war in Ukraine, particularly as the United States attempts to press for an end to the war. Moscow is seeking clarity on whether it can expect further support from Beijing and how China would respond if Washington pushed it to apply pressure on Russia. Since the invasion, China has become a critical economic partner for Russia, boasting bilateral trade of more than $240 billion last year and emerging as the top buyer of Russian oil and coal. Talks are expected to cover energy projects such as the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline, as well as expanding oil links. The two sides are also likely to discuss military cooperation. While China has not supplied weapons directly, U.S. officials say it provides most of the machine tools and semiconductors Russia needs to maintain its defense industry. In return, Beijing is believed to receive access to some advanced technologies. Russia has even floated the idea of China acting as a security guarantor for Ukraine, although Kyiv is expected to reject any such proposal. The visit will also carry some symbolism, with Putin joining Xi at the Tiananmen Square parade, echoing Xi's role at the Moscow Victory Day parade earlier this year. Observers say the shared focus on World War II victory helps underpin their partnership. Kim Jong-un's presence may also allow for Beijing to smooth tensions over with Russia's closer military ties to North Korea, which has sent troops to assist Moscow in exchange for advanced weapon systems. In Washington, the Trump administration has pursued a strategy of driving a wedge between Moscow and Beijing, but with little effect. China has managed to avoid a trade war with the U.S. and has not faced secondary sanctions for buying Russian oil, while Russia has ignored U.S. demands to scale back its war aims in Ukraine. Analysts note that while Beijing prefers the fighting to end, it sees little incentive to accelerate peace efforts itself, opting instead to maintain close ties with Moscow while reaping the economic and diplomatic benefits. And that's it for the main items this week. We will now move to the next segment.
Yeah, next segment, that would be me. Hello, guys. As always, I will now present this week's most important news from Germany regarding Ukraine. However, I have only one important item to report this week, so I make it short. Let's just start the video. This week, I was finally able to disclose that Germany has transferred its 8th IRIS-T SLM fire units to Ukraine. I knew about this for a couple of weeks now. Had to wait until the transfer was done, and waited another 2 weeks so the system entered deployment already in Ukraine. The Ukrainian soldiers already completed training last month. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Nothing else really happened, or nothing else important really happened here in Germany. Yeah, very, very good news. Another powerful air defense system, and yeah, that's it for my segment already. Like I said, keep it short.
Just look at that footage, though.
Yeah, it's old footage. Not new. I believe it's from 2024 or so.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
Have you figured out anything more about the Norwegian participation or investment in Hensoldt radars for Ukraine?
Nothing which I can disclose.
Okay. But it's interesting. Can we comment on like what the public details about it? Because I think it's...
Yeah. So the public details are that I believe at the beginning of the week, right, on Tuesday or so, Norway put out a big press release saying that they first contribute to the German Patriot deliveries, which is very good for us, very sad for Ukraine, because so far, and Erlend, please correct me if I'm wrong, but so far I was under the expression that Germany said we are going to finance 2 Patriots for Ukraine, and Norway said they're also willing to finance another one. So I was under the impression that if we find these fire units, we can actually deliver 3 in total to Ukraine. Norway has now said that they are financially contributing to the German deliveries, which in my opinion means that nobody else wants to part with their fire units, meaning that the Germans now getting the money from Norway, which is good for us, sad for Ukraine because it means Ukraine only gets 2 additional ones. Then Norway also said that they are contributing to an Hensoldt contract. And then they also said that they are contributing to German delivery of, what was it again? Typhoon 2, counter UAS systems, which also funded by Germany, and Norway is contributing to it. Regarding the Hensoldt contract, there are 2 possibilities. The first possibility would be that Norway is once again contributing to the IRIS-T SLM deliveries in an undisclosed amount, meaning that Hensoldt's radar, the TRM-4D, is the standard air surveillance radar implemented in the IRIS-T SLM fire units. And that would be the first option, that Norway is giving us, I don't know, 100, 200 million, whatever. That's that's way too much, but you know what I mean. And we're going to allow Norway to fund, let's say, 6 radars, and this means that Norway has contributed to the next 6 IRIS-T SLM-5 units. That would be one option. Another option, and this is not public knowledge, and this is not confirmed, is that a couple of weeks ago, Hensoldt put out a big press release saying that they have been contracted by another country. So it's not confirmed that Germany is that, and I'm not saying I can confirm that here. But they've put out a press release saying that they've been contracted by an unknown country that to produce and deliver first TRM-4D air surveillance radars for Ukraine, and also SPEXA radars, which are short-range radars, basically, for Ukraine. And this would be another option if Norway, and I'm not saying that is the case, but if Norway would to fund this contract, that would mean that Germany is financing the Hensoldt contract, or has concluded that contract. But that's, like I said, not publicly confirmed. So with the public knowledge, we have to go that Norway is once again, Norway is once again co-funding the IRIS-T SLM deliveries to Ukraine. And I'm saying once again because they've done that with I believe it was the 5th fire unit, where Norway gave us something like 86 million euros or something, which is like a little bit more than half of what an IRIS-T or what a full IRIS-T SLM-5 unit is worth. And that's what I can publicly say. I hope that was a satisfying answer.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting news, and it's like, not directly German aid to Ukraine, but in some way it is. So I was just surprised you didn't mention any of these.
Yeah, to be
The
honest, I
big-
was I agree. I was under the impression that Joseph handled this Norway stuff, so I didn't mention anything. But it's good that you brought this up later.
Oopsie.
Yeah, don't worry, man.
Yeah, thank you. But I mean, it's. I just want to comment that on the Norwegian aid to Ukraine, sometimes there are quite specific press releases on how much money and what generally it's being spent on. But there is also a lot of stuff that is very vague and or just is not being talked about at all. So with this fact that we're financing one of the German Patriot deliveries to Ukraine, it doesn't exclude that we also ordered stuff from the US, if that makes sense.
Yep. To be honest, I found it quite funny to read the press release from the Norwegian government or the Norwegian MOD, because there was so much stuff mentioned, which was not public knowledge by the Germans. The Germans didn't mention that at all, and after I asked the Norwegian MOD about it, normally they are very, very open with me and very expressive and give me as much information as they can. This time, and I actually stated that to them: if you mean this, then it's actually not public knowledge. And why did you disclose this? Because the Germans didn't disclose this. And this time it was basically like, oops, you better go to the Germans and ask them if we fucked up that much. Was quite funny.
Cool. Okay, that was very good answers. Thank you.
I like
Thanks for the question.
I like how German aid tried to have the shortest segment he's ever had, and it turned into the longest segment he's ever had. Because
that's not true. I had longer segments. Remember back in the days when the Germans had published like once a week or maybe once every 2 weeks or so they have delivered everything. I feel like I've talked 5 minutes just to list out everything which was delivered.
That's true. You did used to have long lists of equipment, down to grenades. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I miss that times.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, I miss them too. All right. So, Mr. Stanimir, we now move to your report, sir, on the Russian economy. Now, one thing I did want to mention, Erlend, if you could pull up that image, but it's not necessary. But I wanted to start out with just like a simple thing, which is that there's been like major media coverage this week of a gas crisis in Russia. I think like the simplest way I can sum it up is like every major outlet kind of ran a story related to this. I'll just name the Reuters one because I think it's like the most straightforward. Or actually, the Newsweek one is good. Russia gripped by gas shortage after Ukraine strikes. I think that's like everyone is basically writing some variation of that. So I think you've done a great job of following the gas situation in Russia, like granularly over time and like trends and things like that. But I think it's maybe a good time to like step back. Yeah. So if you just search for like Russia gasoline, right? Like that's every news article or every major news publication right now. So yeah, I just thought it'd be a good time to just step back and like, like what do you make of all this? Yeah, like what is the situation from your perspective as someone who's actually followed this for a long time?
Yeah, so I have to say that first there was an initial issue this year that they exported 500,000 tons more gasoline than they usually export in the spring. That's significant because Russia weekly produces somewhere between 700,000 tons and 900,000 tons when things are okay of gasoline per week, and that is almost entirely consumed by the Russian public and the Russian market, which means that usually in stock they have something like between 1,900,000 tons and 2 million tons of gasoline in stocks, which means that when you export that much, your cushion for potential crisis becomes even smaller. And also, part of the gasoline shortage was actually Russian refineries that service the Far East, reducing their deliveries to the Russian Far East by over 50% in some cases. So they're relying on two refineries. One of them decreased shipments by 57%, the other by 25%. In the Russian Far East, there is a deficit of fuel of around 2 million tons a year. So that is why we saw in the periphery of the Russian Far East gasoline shortages. So on the islands of the Kurils, we saw them in the Primorsky Krai, and that's what caused it. Now, it was linked partially to more purchases from these eastern refineries by the central regions, which had problems sourcing gasoline because there was more damage to the refineries. But I don't think at this point it has reached the extent where they're physically unable to provide enough gasoline for the entire country. It's only linking to the periphery, and prices are rising because there is a shortage in the market. But also prices are artificially kept down at state-owned gas stations, which can be forced by the government to offer lower prices. So independent gas stations are more likely to sell more with less price control. Now, what I said is that they have a sort of a cushion for gasoline shortages. So if we say that, let's say 25% of the Russian refineries have been hit and something like 14% of Russian refining capacity is currently knocked out, they would still need a few weeks to burn through that 1.5 million tons of gasoline they have as spare stock. And also they have the ability to use some lighter distillates to boost gasoline production temporarily. So they still have some outs, and before we start seeing this gasoline shortage creep back in further into the central parts of Russia, they have to go through a few weeks of burning those stocks. And those stocks in some places, like there are a few bases all over Russia, so they would not be spent evenly. So in some places, we're going to start seeing even more disruptions, and we're going to see even more queues at gas stations. Right now, they still have the ability to absorb some losses, but they're definitely panicking because they extended the total ban of gasoline exports till the 31st of October. And October is their magic month because that's when summer consumption switches to winter consumption, and you can manage to produce something like 800,000 tons a week, and that would be enough for your domestic consumption. Is that a good enough answer on everything that's working here? So they're in a crisis, but it's a slow building crisis because there are stocks, there are ways they can boost production, but they're in a crisis and they're looking at it in slow motion, like they're a train that's crashing into a wall and they can't stop it fast enough.
Gotcha. No, that's, I think, a good overview. I guess like my final question about that, and then you can provide your general report. Is just like as you mentioned, like it's just kind of happening in slow motion. Is there anything the Russians could do to like stop this from happening or course correct at this point? And then, is there anything in the coverage this week from all these major publications that you, I don't know, like do you have any comment about like what are they getting right? Are they getting anything wrong? Something like that. But yeah, after that you can resume your report.
Yeah, I'd say they're a bit over optimistic on the amount of refining capacity that has actually been knocked out. And they're also too optimistic on how quickly that will hit gas stations. Because what has hit gas stations were things that had built up over months previously. Not so much the immediate effects of gas shortages due to, as the Russians call it, unscheduled maintenance periods and repairs of refineries. What they have gotten right is that this is severe for Russia. Russia can't actually just make up refining out of thin air. Gasoline refining is a big problem for Russia generally. Like I said, they only produce 90% of what they consume, 90% of what they produce. Even small fluctuations in exports can have big effects downstream. And apart from that, what they can do is, like I said, they can rely on some light distillates to mix with fuel in terms of making up for some gasoline production. Also, they can rely on taking up imports from Kazakhstan. Now, Kazakhstan officially doesn't allow exports, but you can have black market imports and things past the border that shift things in a few of the border regions of Russia with Kazakhstan. Also, they can rely a bit on Minsk and Belarus exporting gasoline to them to make up some of the shortages. They still have some options.
Oh, thanks, Stanimir. Yeah, so if you want to provide your general report about the Russian economy this week, feel free.
Yeah, so we start with the GDP growth that was announced for July this week. So after GDP growth for the first 7 months of 1.1%, the GDP growth for July was only 0.4% in annual terms. So it's falling dramatically, and we might expect to see a zero in the next few months, realistically. Also, when it comes to Russian hiring practices, the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs said that the number of companies that expect to reduce their staffing costs rose by 12% in Q2 2025 to 30% now want to lower their staffing costs. That means 2/3 of these companies will reduce hiring, and almost half will cut their benefit packages. When it comes to the Russian coal industry, we got the review for the first half of 2025. So the net loss, that is the combination of all the net profits versus all the net losses, it came out to 26 times higher than in the first half of 2025, when it was something around 7 billion rubles. Now it's 185 billion rubles in net loss for the entire industry. So 66% of companies in the coal industry reported losses versus only 34%, which reported profits for the first half of 2025. We have another news from the Russian Union of Industrialists, and it wants to make permanent tax benefits for companies that are hit by Ukrainian drone strikes. That means that they're not expecting this to be a temporary thing. They're expecting this to become even worse. And they also want tax benefits for investment for any money they spent on recovering production capacity after strikes. Also, we had a small write-off of debt. The Russian government, the federal government, wrote off 25 billion rubles in debt for 9 Russian regions. This is part of their plan to write off up to 1.1 trillion of debt over the next few years of Russian regions. Again, this doesn't write off all of the debt the Russian regions have because they also borrow expensively. Like the Kyiv region borrowed from a bank at 21% a loan, but it still helps the regional budgets, which are struggling right now, especially with having to fund part of the war costs. Now, we had big releases of data this week, and that was the Russian industrial output was released this week. So for July 2025, it again grew, this time by only 0.7% compared to 2024. We have, again, the Russian civilian industry is severely down. The only thing that's growing fast in the Russian civilian industry is medication. It grew by 13.6% in terms of output. Everything else is more or less either flat or at 100% of what it used to be, or down by 5-10%. So metallurgy is down by 10.2%, I think. And the biggest decrease is in the automotive industry, which is still down 26.5%. So it's hovering around 29-26% in terms of how much output in terms of the automotive industry is decreased. What is growing is the production of electronics, which rose by 7.8%. Now, this includes also guidance and missile systems. That is why this sector is growing, and also drones. And the other thing that's growing is finished metal goods, which again includes weaponry. So all the ammunition that Russia produces falls into this category. That's why it's growing. Now it's good because we've used to seeing them grow with the teens or 20% or 30% sometime last year. Now they're going by under 10%. So we're seeing probably soon there's going to be a plateau. What is not plateauing is the heavy military equipment production, and the category that features it is growing by 49.1%. But overall, Russian domestic civilian industry is down. It's firmly in a recession now. The only thing that's keeping industry up is the military procurement and, to a degree, the medication production. We also had the index of forecasts of Russian industry. What it showed was that optimism fell down to the worst level it's been since April 2022. The high point of this index was in 2023 when it was at plus 22 points. Now it's at minus 12 points, which is even worse than April 2022. So comparatively, we're now at the level of March 2022 in terms of the optimism of industry. Everything is down across the board. So their expectation for sales are down, their expectation for investment is down. And it continues to follow the trend that Russian domestic industry is struggling significantly, even if overall numbers don't show it because defense industry is covering that up. Also wanted to point out that one of the largest Russian mining companies, Metro, had abysmal results for the first half of 2025. Now, they recently replaced their CEO with a new one, but overall revenue decreased 26% to 152 billion rubles. The net loss grew 143% for the first half of 2025 to 40.5 billion rubles. That is close to $500 million. And it has a net debt of 252 billion rubles. And that's only 3% lower than in 2024. It's going to be a struggle for them to actually service this debt because their EBITDA is only 5.7 billion rubles for the first half of 2025. They've managed to get some extensions, but the debt that is coming due is very expensive for them, and I don't think they'll be able to cover their costs. So what they're selling currently is metallurgical coal at between $124 to $207 per ton, and steel billets at $450 to $455 per ton. What they would need to be able to service this debt is to sell coal at $250, so almost $50 more. And in terms of steel, they would need to sell it at $700, so $250 more than what's currently the price on the Russian market and for Russian exports. And this is not a small company. It has 50,000 workers. It's involved in metallurgy. It's involved in steel, in mining ores. It's also involved in coal mining. and it has some power generating capacities for the Russian grid. So we're expecting this to be one of the biggest collapses in terms of Russian coal companies and steel companies that's coming due probably early in 2026 or late in 2025. It's almost unsalvageable when you look at the data. I don't know if they're going to intervene. So far, they've only offered limited support for Russian coal companies. So they've deferred tax payments to November. They've offered some of the insurance that has to be paid for miners to be paid by the Russian government. And they've reduced some of the costs in terms of social spending on workers. But in this case, that would not be enough for this company to survive. Now, moving on to the next topic, which is banking. The Russian banking system still has healthy profits. So for the for July 2025, Russian profits grew by 1.3% compared to June, and there were 397 billion rubles, so close to $5 billion in net profits for the Russian banking system, which isn't bad given how the rest of the economy is struggling. When it comes to Gazprom Bank, for the first half of 2025, their net profit decreased 67% to just 72.3 billion rubles. And for the Russian VEP State Bank, according to the international accounting standards, profits rose 42% to 60 billion rubles. When it comes to commodities and grain, Russia is forecasting that the harvest of grain will be 6.1% higher. Wheat is expected to grow by 3% and all seeds by 11%. However, Rosstat has published data that's showing that actual harvest area isn't as good as it was initially reported for August. So they might actually have to correct this further down the line. It's not clear cut. When it comes to oil and gas, we have a lot of reporting according to the international accounting standards. So Rosneft, not to be confused by Rosneft, with Rosneft, it's a smaller oil company in Russia. It had a net profit of 11.84 billion rubles, which is 3.2 times less than a net profit of 48.48 billion rubles in 2024 for the first half of the year. Tatneft similarly saw its net profit decreased 64.2% to 54.21 billion rubles. Its revenue also decreased from 931 billion rubles to 878 billion rubles. For Gazprom Neft, the profit dropped 54.2% to 150 billion rubles, and revenue dropped 12.1% to 1.775 trillion rubles. Rosneft, now back to them, the actual Rosneft, not the Rosneft. Rosneft had its profit under the international accounting standard decreased by 68% to 245 billion rubles, and its revenue dropped 17.6% to 4.263 trillion rubles. Now, Rosneft has had quarter-over-quarter decreases of net profit and also net profit decreasing year over year. And Gazprom is the only one that's, let me get to the one of the companies that also saw net profit decrease. So Surgutneftgaz reported a loss of 452 billion rubles. That is over $5.5 billion just for the first half of 2025. And in 2024, it had a net profit of 139.9 billion rubles. So Gazprom is the only one that has actually good figures so far, but that's because they reduced its taxes for 2025 by 550 billion rubles. And also the company actually decreased investment significantly under the international accounting standard, which includes all of its businesses, because usually it doesn't feature all its businesses, it's just the core business in the Russian accounting standards. So for the first half of 2025, profit was down 6% to 983.13 billion rubles. The last news we have when it comes to oil and gas is that the LNG tanker Arctic Mulan, which is supposedly carrying Arctic LNG to liquefied natural gas, docked at the Guangxi LNG terminal in China. The Arctic 2 LNG project has been sanctioned by the US, and that's why it hasn't been exporting any LNG so far. So it's important to see if the US is going to follow up with secondary sanctions for the recipients of this cargo from this sanctioned project. And that's an important question for further deliveries from Russian sanctioned projects, because there are more than one in terms of LNG. When it comes to construction, the starts of new construction companies in Russia for the first 7 months decreased by 7.5%. That is for Russia as a whole. In the cities, over 1 million. So 16 cities in Russia have over 1 million population. And this also includes the Moscow region and the Leningrad regions. It decreased by 15%. And for Moscow itself, the start of new construction companies is down 30.6%. So a significant contraction in construction within Moscow, even though Moscow is one of the places where there's still a lot of profitable construction, but that is mainly oriented towards offices and luxury buildings. The growth in the sales of luxury buildings is significant, but it's not enough to offset the entire market, because the luxury segment is very small in terms of actual number of buildings. Also, the commissioning of new warehouses outside of Moscow and St. Petersburg for the first half of 2025 grew by 88%. Usually, most of the construction of warehouses is around Moscow and St. Petersburg. So this is an interesting development. And this reached 1.55 million square meters. And it's expected that for 2025 as a whole, the growth will be 93%, which is due to retail companies focusing on expanding their regional sales through warehouses. Now, when it comes to interesting data points that I found this week, KAMAZ was planning to start to a 3-day working week from September 2025, but they canceled those plans because they expect the truck market to recover in October of 2025. I'm not so sure, because as far as the data has come in August, in July, that is, the data showed that the decrease in heavy truck sales was 61.6%. So it's getting worse. It's not getting better. I don't know what they're expecting, but that means they're going to burn more cash through October, hoping that the market revitalizes. Also, they have enough trucks in stock to cover a few months or maybe a few quarters of sales, even if they recover. Also, they reported a net loss for the first half of 2025 of 31 billion rubles versus a profit in the first half of 2024 of 3.7 billion rubles. And their revenue decreased by 17.9% to 153.9 billion rubles. So this is Russia's biggest truck company reporting for the first half of 2025 a third of a billion euro in terms of losses so far. We're going to see how this market continues, but we're expecting more losses till the end of the year. And the Russian government might have to intervene with some tax breaks or something to keep them stable, because they also have a lot of expensive debt. Also, we saw that the owners of the Russian transport airline Volga-Dnepr, which was famous for its An-124 planes and the Il-76 planes it used, was handed over to the Russian government without any costs. This was because the owners of the company were informed that the state was going to seize the company anyway. So they just forfeit the company for the state. This is another case of essential nationalization of key assets, and the Russian Ministry of Defense would likely want to get its hands on the 5 Il-76 planes to use them as transportation for military goods. The net profit of Russian railways for the first half of 2025 decreased 26 times from 114 billion rubles to 4.4 billion rubles. This is a state company, so its direct impact is on state finances, and it's also Russia's biggest carrier in terms of freight. So it means that they might have to raise prices again for freight, as they're not making any profit to cover their rising costs in personnel and fuel and electricity. The combined revenue of the company grew by 11% despite of this to 1.8 trillion rubles, but operating expenses grew from 1.3 trillion rubles to 1.5 trillion rubles. Again, we're talking about these increased costs in personnel, increased costs in expenses, and all of that. Also, in Russia, we saw a decline in the number of laptops that are being sold. So only 1.7 million laptops were sold for the first half of 2025, which is a decrease of 19% in terms of units. In terms of rubles, they cost 99 billion rubles, so that's a decrease of 15%. Again, there's that creeping inflation. The biggest contributor to the decline was the retail segment. So ordinary Russians can't afford to buy laptops as much as they used to, because for the retail segment, the decrease was 21.4%, whereas for the corporate segment, it decreased only by 5%. And finally, in terms of interesting data points, the Russian car tire production for the second quarter of 2025 decreased by 18.9% compared to 2024. The decrease in compared to the first quarter of 2025 was 10.5%. And again, this is linked to the drop in the Russian automotive market. Without new cars being bought inside Russia from Russian brands, there's less demand for tires. Now, finally, in terms of inflation and Russian borrowing, for the week that was from the 19th of the period, it's not exactly a week, but from the 19th to the 25th of August, there was inflation again of 0.02%. So for August, the deflation was 0.17%, and the inflation for the year is 4.18%. This means that the effect of the harvest on foodstuffs is likely diminished or completely gone so far. So we should expect again in September prices to resume growing in a normal range. In terms of debt, the Russian Ministry of Finance had two auctions again. In the first one, it managed to sell 42.5 billion rubles of debt at the yield of 13.51%. This is the lowest yield so far in 2025. And at the second auction, it sold 35.27 billion rubles of debt at the yield of 14.03%. So again, a return of above 14%. And there is some speak that Russian debt yield might grow again as the Russian government bond index has been decreasing again. So we might see a growth in the cost to service their debt. And that's it for me, I think.
Okay, thank you, Stanimir, for your report on the Russian economy for this week, and we'll stay tuned next week for future developments. Okay, so we got a few other things. It was quite a busy week, gentlemen. The first is, this would have made it into my news report, but it happened kind of last minute. Obviously, very unfortunate event and made headlines all over the place. The former Ukrainian parliamentary speaker, Andrei Parubi, was assassinated in the city of Lviv on Saturday, and there's currently an extensive manhunt going on for the person who did the deed. The assassin dressed as basically a courier and used all the stuff that the courier of a certain company would use. The company put out a statement, obviously, that they were horrified. They'll cooperate with the investigation. But yeah, nothing's really known about who did it or anything like that. So yeah, we'll obviously stay tuned and figure out if anything further happens with that. But I don't think there's really much to discuss in terms of that. But I just wanted to report it because obviously it would have made it into the regular news otherwise. The next thing I wanted to cover was just a quick question I had. So the story was that Hungary said they're going to ban someone in Ukraine, a commander in Ukraine, for the attack on the Druzhba pipeline. Basically, the argument that they gave was that it's threatening Hungary's security, and that's all fine. I understand Hungary can do that, but they said they're going to ban them from Schengen. And real quick, by the way, they didn't specify which commander, but it's assumed to be Magyar, our hero. But anyway, I'm just trying to understand: does Hungary have the authority to ban someone from the Schengen zone?
I doubt they are able to unequivocally ban him from all Schengen countries, but there is a system where a country can signal to the Schengen member countries that certain individuals are not welcome, but that is then has to be implemented by all the countries. I don't think that's possible.
Okay, so there's a system for Hungary to raise some kind of a diplomatic protest, but they don't have the actual authority to ban someone.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes basic sense, Erlend.
I
Thank
just
you.
pulled up.
Yeah, go on.
I just pulled up his response, which is quite funny one. Yeah, he took the classical Magyar, somewhat ironic, poetic response. He came up with some very funny stuff. So I recommend everyone to go and watch that video.
Yeah, definitely. He's someone worth following. One of the I don't know, more important characters on the Ukrainian side in the war. So again, it wasn't Hungary didn't specify that this was the guy they were talking about, but it seems pretty evident that that's who they were talking about. So yeah, thank you for clearing that up, Erlend. Yeah, it confused me a bit just because I remember Hungary was like issuing a bunch of passports to Russians, and they were like allowed in the Schengen zone, and I was like, if they can do that, why? How can they ban this guy? But
Yeah,
what do you
so
think makes sense?
it works kind of the other way around, right? Than Hungary is trying to portray here, because if a Schengen country gives a visa to a non-Schengen country resident, then they will be able to freely move within Schengen. That does not mean, though, that single countries cannot, for instance, arrest or deport people from their country. It just means that they don't need to go through visa applications in each single Schengen country.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, Erlend, while I got you on the line here, I did want to talk a little bit about this. Is another thing that sounds like it's mostly noise, but it's worth talking about just because it seems like it was made a kind of a big splash in the international media and also in your noble country of Norway, which is that Russia basically is big mad about all the sanctions on them, especially related to naval issues. And they've started threatening that in retaliation for all those sanctions, they're basically talking about withdrawing from Arctic fishing treaties that they've had with Norway since olden times. Is that I don't know how accurate that account was. If you want to correct anything in my account, and then just like, was it a big story in Norway? Is it? It doesn't sound like the Russians have actually done anything yet, right? But it's I guess we're covering the coverage here.
Yeah, I mean, it actually wasn't a huge story here, but I think this is what you're talking about. It's basically the Russians, hitting the big drum on the fact that a couple of their fishing industry-related companies has been added to a sanction list, and the thing is, they are probably trying to again say that Norway is violating a treaty, which is from the most recent one from 2011, or it was. I think it was finalized in 2010, and then went into force in 2011, which was a very long dispute about where the separation line in the Barents Sea between Norway and Russia goes. And in that treaty, there is a bunch of fishing and natural resources rights being also divided and shared. So, for instance, there are rights for Norwegian and Russian fishing vessels to be able to go to port in each respective countries. And Norway has, since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, restricted that to a very limited amount of ports. Personally, I think we should have just, of course, kicked them out completely. But the fear is that would then violate this separation line agreement, which could implement, it could complicate things in the Barents Sea. Yeah, I think they're just trying to bang a drum here and see if Norway reacts in some way or form, which we won't, most likely.
Yeah, it sounds like it'd be a pretty big headache for Russia to cause a bunch of chaos up there anyway. So hopefully it's just it's probably just idle noise from Russia, which we see a lot of, right? They threaten things all the time. So
the thing is that they're in a very comfortable situation right now, where a lot of their fishing vessels have access to Norwegian ports, which is, in my opinion, ridiculous, because a lot of these so-called fishing vessels are spy ships, right? And they're being monitored heavily, and this excuse from the government here is that since they can only go to 4 selected ports, then it's easy to monitor them. There could be a counterintelligence argument there, that it's better to kind of observe the enemy's capabilities on close range rather than just banning them outright. But the truth here is that they're both earning money on this deal still, delivering fish to Norwegian ports, that they fish in their seas and in Norwegian seas, etc., and they selling it to higher profits through Norwegian companies, which is obviously something I would not rather see. I think we should ban all Russian fishing vessels from entering Norwegian commercial waters, and also we should ban all sort of so-called research vessels in our territorial waters.
now you have me picturing like a Russian ship of spies pretending to be fishermen and then spying on Norway, and then a Norwegian ship of spies spying on the Russian ship pretending to be fishermen, and they both know that they're spying on each other, but they have to pretend to be fishermen.
Yeah, something like that. But that's basically what they do, right? And they don't only do it here; they do it in the Baltic Sea. They do it in and around the British Isles, and it's been a thing for decades. It's not new. They have so-called research vessels that is mapping the bottom of the sea, and their excuse is that it's to keep an eye on the environment, but it's obviously bullshit.
Well, keeping up with the theme of boats, that was pretty much. Anything else you want to say about this topic, Erlend? I think we're good.
No, it covers it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. My last boat-related item of the week is that I already mentioned in my news report that Ukraine, I don't think they destroyed a ship. That sounds like they damaged it, at least, enough that it might need to go get repairs. A missile ship, a surface ship. And also this week, it was reported that Ukraine lost, I think, a smaller surface ship. A manned ship to a Russian drone. I don't remember all the exact details, but I don't know. I guess surface navies ? I mean, are we seeing? Is this part of a trend towards drones starting to have significant advantages over surface navies that we haven't seen in the past? Or do you think it's just a fluke that this week we saw these two things happen?
Not a Navy guy, but I can comment.
I'm asking you, Erlend, because you're like the closest we have to it, but it's true. You're not. You've served in the land army.
Yeah, I find interest in Navy stuff, of course. I think it's very interesting, but personal opinion, I don't think we're ever going to see frigates and destroyers off the military charts. There are a couple of reasons for it. The air defense capabilities and the long-range strike capabilities that these ships and vessels are fielding are quite significant, but also of course, the very heavy focus on submarine anti-submarine warfare and detection. It's quite a big part of having a surface navy. Maybe we will see, or I'm sure we will see different ways of operating in the future. And on this note, I want to mention that Norway just basically announced that we're buying 5, possibly more Type 26 UK frigates, which is going to be one of the largest investments that Norwegian defense has done for a very long time. And I hope that the USV threat is being taken into account when these vessels are being outfitted.
Yeah, what you said makes sense. Like there's a lot of like missions, or in terms of rounding out what a naval power needs to do, like there's a lot of things that those ships do that you can't really replicate with just like a bunch of drones throwing a bunch of drones at the problem. So I guess in the future we'll maybe see more active measures to protect ships from USV threats, as it were. But yeah, just kind of an interesting. We're definitely not there yet for surface navies, so I guess we'll see more of this probably in the future until there's like an evolutionary catch up with the drone situation.
You remember from history what happened with all the fleets when they were going to port back in World War II? We saw deployment of enormous metal wire nets, right, to protect against submarines. The Russians have been doing a lot of this, and I'm not sure. You can't say that it hasn't been successful in the sense that Ukraine didn't still sink the entire Black Sea fleet, right? So it is possible to defend against USV. I just think that it's a new dimension, of course, to naval warfare, more because it enables a smaller country to actually pose a threat towards these navies, which means that it will be a lot more difficult to operate freely. That doesn't mean that they're irrelevant in the future. Also, if you look at the North Sea, the Atlantic, the distances and the roughness of the seas is completely different. I think the USVs that we've seen in the Black Sea largely have been successful, possibly also because of the conditions there. You won't see 10 to 15 meter high waves in the Black Sea, while if you go off the coast of Norway, that's what you're going to find. And I think those small USVs would have to be modified somehow, enabled to, if you want to enable them in those kind of seas. It's going to be a completely different ballgame.
Yeah, it's true. We also looking at like the Kerch Bridge area, right? They've Ukraine's definitely poked around there with USVs, and the Russians have put up nets and dolphin patrols and all kinds of crazy stuff. And so far, Ukraine hasn't seemed to be able to get through it. So there are, as you said, like some defense measures that seem to work against USVs. So yeah, I don't know. As you said, it's going to be tougher for surface navies just cruising around. There are going to be countries that normally or in the past wouldn't have posed a threat that now have some capability if they invest, properly to pose some level of threat. So, yeah, I think that's all my stuff this week. I guess the one other topic, sort of related. You mentioned the Baltic, and I was like, that's such a great transition for this, but I had to stick with my boats. Is of course Daniela's paper, and of course Jay's here. Jay stumbled on a spy station, and Daniela wrote an article about it. And yeah, it's had a crazy life cycle in the media. We saw first, I would say, Build picked it up. I think that was the first publication, and then a bunch of people saw that Build's article, and they like either quoted Build's article or were like, why don't we do an article about this? So I think in the same way the Russian gas crisis story, just everyone started doing a story this week, even though, they probably could have done it last week, is, that started off like a chain reaction where a bunch of media articles were written that cited the article on Tochnyi.info that Daniela wrote as a source. And yeah, they talked about Tochnyi. They mentioned, like they did their best to read our website and figure out what our deal is. And, they gave us credit. Everyone gave us credit, which was really great. And yeah, I don't know. It's just great to see all all the researchers doing the work, getting the credit, and that people are finding important information and they're learning about things. And I don't know, I'm happy to see it all. Mr. Erlend, you've been away for a bit. You came back to all this stuff. What say you, sir?
Well, I've observed it. I was on some travels, but I've been looking at all of this unfolding, and it's kind of funny how people mention Tochnyi in certain countries without going too much into details. But I'm just happy on Daniele, on Jay's behalf, that a lot of work. There's a lot of work that you never see, and then suddenly there's something that kind of piques more interest and will eventually surface into something like this. Yeah, I consulted Daniele when he was writing the article, and was very happy to see when he published it. But I was not prepared that it would go this or reach this far. But that's positive. It's funny. Like, I thought this was going to be like a cool article for nerds, but apparently this was very interesting for people all around the world. So that's cool.
Yeah, really cool article by Daniela. Like, all I can add is it's the first time I had the experience that basically in my social environment, like I got messages from colleagues from work, or also from family members, is like, hey, aren't you hanging out with these guys? And I said, yeah, we are an investigative platform. And yeah, very interesting. Feels quite satisfying, I must say.
Yeah, I think it's satisfying on many in many ways, because these kind of very specific kind of nerdy topics are being noticed, but also because it's very important on a strategic level as well. This is a massive installation, probably both capable of signal intelligence and very long range radio transmissions, possibly also with the Russian submarine fleet. And the construction of such a large site means that Russia is on all levels preparing for something larger. They're not ramping down their war industry. They're basically speeding it up on it's Daniela has been investigating these kind of capacities being built all around Russia, war industry, drone manufacturing capabilities, missile manufacturing capabilities, all these kind of things. And I think this one is a little bit different, but very important on the strategic point of view.
I like that for this whole saga, I had two jobs. One job was to introduce Daniela when he presented this article on the stream. And I was like, oh, isn't this that article about trains? And he was like, no, it's about this other thing. And then I did a promo where I tried to show all the publications that we covered. And I mixed up the Czech and the Polish languages. I was quickly editing together a promo, and I offended some Czech people, so I'm very sorry. I apologize on behalf of both, or I shouldn't say on behalf. I apologize to both the Czech and Polish speaking peoples of the world for confusing that. So yeah, I had two jobs during this, and I screwed up both of them. Mr. Jonathan, I'm about to screw up my third and final job. Mr. Jonathan, he's compiled a list, because it was interesting for us to just kind of track how this thing spreads, right? Because that's a lot of what Tochnyi is interested in, is the information economy itself, and why certain things kind of make it through and why certain things don't. And obviously, we think this is important, as Erlend said, for lots of reasons. And it's like really positive that the media recognize, like, to us, this is a case of the media like working correctly, where they're like, oh, this is an important piece of like empirical information. Let's report it to the public. And then they go show it to the public and they say, here's what it is and why it's important. And the public goes, thanks, media. Like that's how it's sort of supposed to work in I'd say in an ideal world. So it's just like nice to see that happen. So we've kind of studied this as like an event. So Jonathan wanted me to read this list of publications that reference Tochnyi's investigative story about this platform. So Newsweek, United 24, Militarny, Ukrainian News Agency, TCH, which is a Ukrainian news outlet, Defense Romania, TVP World, Army Recognition, WP Tech, Armadni's Provadaj, which is a Czech outlet. Oh man, I've offended the Czechs yet again. Newsmax, which is a U.S. outlet, a very pro-Trump outlet. Slovakian news outlet, TV Noviny. Forsal, which is a Polish outlet. Defense Express, Ukrainian. Union.ua, which is another Ukrainian outlet. Kyiv 24 News. Glabnoe, which is a Ukrainian outlet. Correspondent.net, another Ukrainian outlet. Prominent Azerbaijani news website, Hakin.Azerbaijan or AZ. Ukrainian news outlet, news.pn. Moscow Times. Damn, I didn't know the Moscow Times. Patrioti.org, which is another Ukrainian outlet. Meta.ua. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, but Vietnam's Ministry of Education and Training News website publication. Build, Welt, Zakon in Kazakhstan. Technologios, which is a Lithuanian science outlet. Euronews. France 24. The leading Uzbek language news outlet. Dalampir. onalert.gr, which is a Greek news outlet. Another Romanian news outlet, Putera.Romania, Nur.kz, one of Kazakhstan's most influential outlets. MSN, which is a U.S. news outlet. RBC, I think is Canadian, but I probably screwed that up. TCH and NV.ua, Ukrainian outlets. RP.pl, huge Polish outlet. And one of Bavaria's leading regional newspapers, Merkur.Deutschland. Yeah, all of them ran stories that were basically a summary of Daniela's article. So it was a crazy like little event that happened. We're really happy that everyone not only found the information useful, but also like duly recognized the people who worked hard to find all the information. And they were super kind to us. So yeah, we want to sincerely thank all the publications for running that story, because we think it's important that the public know about it. And they did us a real solid by spreading the word. Erlend, any final thoughts we should add about this, the whole saga?
Well, I want to add that I really appreciate Chris's graphics on this this article, and also on the next article, which Daniela published just recently, which is on the Alabuga plant, where Russia is manufacturing most of the Shahed type drones. And I encourage everyone to go take a look at that article. It is very in depth about the whole plant, what it needs to operate in terms of raw materials, and how specifically it could be possible to hamper its production. So yeah, I would encourage everyone to go check that out. It's also yet another very good investigative article by Daniela. This also has very cool graphics made by Chris.
Yeah, Alabuga plant, very interesting, where there was a huge document leak there. So there's lots of information about it. And I'm sure there's been lots of developments since that leak. I got to read Daniela's new article about that. Very smooth plug, Erlend. Thank you for doing that. You still got it after your trip. Yeah, so I think that's it for our stuff. I think now we can move to Q&A. I don't see a ton of questions in the chat. Chat's a little sleepy this week, it looks like. Someone mentioned, like, is the guy who is going to Shanghai a Putin body double? Man, there's a lot of like Kremlinology. That's like a whole subfield of Kremlinology. Like, is there a fake Putin? I tend not to speculate about that stuff. I don't consider myself like a fake Putin understander. I'd say the only two pieces of like my only two hot takes about it are this. Number one, there was like a scene where Putin went somewhere and was like hugging people, like local people. I want to say it was Kursk. And like, to me, that's crazy. I don't think Putin would ever do that. Like, just everything I've ever heard about the man is that he's like a paranoid weirdo. He's definitely freaked out by COVID. Like, I don't think he would just go around hugging people, even if it was like super carefully choreographed. Then the other thing is like Putin has like a very unique walk. I think it's a political affectation, but he does like this weird like KGB shuffle. And so I don't know if you put a, I shouldn't say that on YouTube, but if you threaten me and said you have to find the fake Putin in these pictures of Putin, that's what I look for, is that weird walk that he does. I don't know. Stanimir, do you think you can catch a fake Putin?
I usually stay away from that discussion. There's not enough concrete things for that. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I
That's
agree.
something I don't touch.
Yeah, there's a lot of like speculation on Twitter and other places. It's like you can clearly see this chin pattern is like a fake Putin, and I don't know, man. I'm not sure it really like matters that much if it's a fake or a real Putin. Like, most Russians are probably just like, yep, it's real. I don't care. So whatever. But yeah, I don't know. Kind of a weird. It's interesting that it has become its own field of Kremlinology, of like, the pseudoscience of understanding Russia is whether there's fake Putins. This sounds like a Stanimir question. I heard that Russian banks are making significant profits on the back of high mortgage interest rates. What's your understanding? Are commercial banks charging a lot for mortgages and loans?
Yes, they are. So they've fallen. The rates have fallen actually, but on mortgages, if you take it out right now, so the central bank key interest rate is 18%. The mortgage rate is, I think, on average 23% for a new building, and it's 23% for also an existing building. If it's under construction, it's down to 22.3%. What they're making more money on is the unsecured loans. So their banks are making still 40% in terms of annual interest without the additional fees. So yeah, Russian banks are making a lot of money out of Russians. And also Russian microfinancing companies are making a lot of money out of Russians. At least half of their, or a bit below half actually, I think it was 47% of the loans that microfinancing organizations give out have an interest rate in annual terms of over 200%. So there's a lot of money to be made. They also have a lot of defaults, but yes.
Okay, so it sounds like you would largely agree with the idea that Russian banks are like profiting right now off of these the situation, basically the high interest rates and high mortgage rates.
Yes, what they're complaining is that they can't lend more money to risky borrowers. That's what they're complaining in terms of macroprudential measures, because the Russian central bank doesn't want Russian banks to primarily focus on risky borrowers, like people who have mortgage or loan payments that are over 50% of their official income. They might have additional gray market income, but they don't want banks to focus on these borrowers where before they focused on them. But yeah, and the net effect is that Russia's poorest people are now more in debt than before. We have a portion of the Russian population that has no savings whatsoever.
Well, thank you for that answer, Stanimir. And then there's actually another question for you. Stanimir is saying that he thinks Russian debt costs will rise again after falling recently. Why is that? So I guess why did they fall, and why do you think they'll rise again?
They fell with the interest rate, and they also fell with the expectation that America will soften its position and want to introduce more sanctions or strengthen existing sanctions and add additional pressure on Russia. Now that that hasn't materialized in two meetings, in phone calls and meetings, to spread it like that, I don't think the Russian market will be as optimistic. And we've seen the Russian state bond index. There is an index that covers Russian bonds, the state ones at least. It's lowering again, which means interest is expected to go up.
All right, thanks, Stanimir. Are there any other questions you guys see that we should address?
Nope,
I don't
not from my
know.
side.
Think that was it.
Okay, guys. Well, I think that means we can wrap it up. Mr. Erlend, is there anything else we should cover before we wrap up?
Well, nothing that I've prepared or have on my mind. There is also always something to talk about, but yeah, that's I think it for us.
All right. Well, yeah, it was a busy week, so we did our best to cover everything. I think it's going to be probably another busy week this week, so we'll do our best to keep track of everything going on for you guys, and we hope everyone has a great week. Thanks, of course, to our panel, Mr. Germany to Ukraine, Mr. Erlend, Mr. Stanimir, Mr. J, and myself. Thank you to our chat. Thanks, guys, for your questions and for tuning in live. We appreciate that. We appreciate your support. We like hanging out with you guys. Your feedback and your questions really help us understand what the public wants to know about this issue and this topic. And thanks, of course, to the people who watch the videos after the fact. We know not everyone has time to make the live, so thanks for your support later on down the line. And yeah, we'll see everyone next week. If you can, do like and subscribe. Check us out on Twitter and Blue Sky. Go to Tochnyi.info, that place where the articles that make the news come from. And yeah, we'll see everyone next Sunday at 2100 Kyiv time. As always, Slava Ukraini.
Heroям слава.
On behalf of the brave.